Go ahead and just make
Okay,
the announcement
same
now
date.
and make it official.
All right.
Friday will be the last day.
Two things.
You can get a signed copy.
Okay, this is what?
The Great Reset.
My
War
fourth
for the
video?
World. A, because we're about to sell out of the first group of books we got shipped.
Okay.
They start shipping next week. And B,
So...
I'm going to sign these, and I can't sign.
All right. So what we got here is a new subject. Okay. I just got this today. Not that I can see it, people. How convenient, right? Perfect timing, don't you think? But besides that point, did you see? Okay, now this came from the Surrey Memorial Hospital. Oh boy. And it's in regards to my grandson, Andre Tourney. These are his medical files since birth. Okay? Now, I know not everything is in here because the Surrey Memorial Hospital, Fraser Health Authority, and my doctor, my family doctor, denied me access to Sierra's medical files. Interesting, don't you think? They said there was too much third-party information in there to give it to me. Well, that's what Fraser Health Authority, Surrey Memorial Hospital Records Department said. My doctor, my family doctor said, just take him to court, to which I just might do that yet, people. Yeah. Yeah, I just might do that yet, people. Anyway, what is this? Let's read it. In response to your request for information on the patient indicated above, we have enclosed copies of the requested documents. Can you hear me? Please note that information has been withheld because I have to go to court to go get it. Under section 221 and 22.1 and 22.2 F. On the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, the affected areas have been identified on the copies under section 52 of the Act. You are entitled to request a review of our response. You may do so within 30 business days of receiving this letter by writing to the Office of Freedom of Information and Privacy Commissioner at the address set out below. Now, we've done this before, Tisha and I. We've written asking for Tisha's stuff that they took out, and they denied it. They denied it, people. I'm pretty sure. From her medical files. They denied me whatever they took out with Shamay medical files, because I think I wrote them twice. Now, the date that I received this August 24th of 2022. What is the date today? What is it? What is the letter dated? August 22nd. Okay? No, they've got it dated from August 18th. I'm receiving it on the 24th, people. Okay? They're saying from the date that I received this, they can just post-date it by saying I received it on the 18th because the letter reads the 18th. Just like with the Sonia 2, when she was going on with Judge Ross there, how I filed my notice of civil claim on April 20th, when in fact that's not true. I went there on the 16th. I was turned away because they had nobody in the registry, nothing but a drop box. I couldn't put cash in a drop box, so I had to leave. And then I went off and got a money order, and I went back the next day, and I dropped it off in the drop box, but they didn't post it until the 20th. Okay? So, if they wanted to throw it out on a technicality and they could say that I exceeded my 2-year maximum statute of limitation. Not that there's any statute of limitation on quote-unquote murder, but because, Shamay was unplugged from their embalming machine that was keeping her looking alive when in fact she wasn't, people. And in terms of material facts, well, I'm going to work with what I have to prove that, okay, with what I just said, okay? How the judge, the next time we go around this situation, wants to determine those material facts after I'm done with them remains to be seen, okay? So in the meantime, I'm not fighting just for Shamay. I'm fighting for Sierra too, people, right? And everybody else in my family, okay? And I needed a comparison in terms of what a C-section is when it's written down in a medical file. I have Shamay's medical files with the C-section, but I don't have Andre's medical files with the C-section. I have Amari's medical files with the C-section, but what I have in Amari's medical files is the aftermath of the C-section. In other words, he pooped in her stomach before he was taken out, right? He was under duress, even though they gave him a high score, like when they're born, the Argo, or I don't know how to pronounce it. I can't even think how to spell it right now. Anyway, they gave him like a 9 or something, really, really high, just to remove the fact that he was, okay, because as soon as you get into his medical files, that's all they did was write on how he was being jittery and stuff, and they were checking his blood sugar levels, and they were starting to prescribe him things, and they gave him some kind of something to prevent infection from having feces in the amniotic fluid because he had pooped while inside her stomach, right? And the reason they did the emergency C-section is because his heartbeat went down after 5 days of basically labor, to which the last day they were monitoring it for hours and hours and hours, and then it suddenly dropped. It wouldn't come back up. And then they booked in their emergency C-section. So 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, however long it takes to rush her off into an emergency operation for a C-section, I don't know. But by the time they took him out, he had pooped, right? And he came out like this, to the point where every day they were monitoring it, they were noting it down, but by the third day, all of a sudden, magically, it was like it all went away, and they just sent him home. And then, when she was taking him in for his checkups, how you go to the hospital, like to the family doctor after the fact for baby checkup every 2 weeks or whatever it is. She did that right up until the 7th month before she was murdered. And none of those doctors in that clinic even came close to figuring out that maybe there was something wrong with the baby because, he was developmentally delayed. Why did the doctors not notice it, people? Because the doctors knew. That's why. That's why my doctor is telling me to take him to court, because he doesn't think that I would in order to get my daughters, both of them, medical files. Okay? Because that's pretty much what it boils down to here. right? Because how is it you take your baby to a family doctor and to the prenatal clinic for checkups and all this other stuff, right? But nobody notices that are professionals that there's something wrong with the baby, even though it's documented in the first 3 days of his life that there's something freaking wrong because of this shit. Because they let it drag out, people. That's why. They let it drag out, hoping that, sooner or later, which we did, we'd figure it out on our own, and then they could all play dumb and stupid, go on their research hunt to figure out what was wrong with him, put him through all these tests, botch one MRI, book him in for another one. You know what I'm saying? Right? To come back and tell me what they already knew happened to him. Okay? Okay? Doctors are trained to pick up on that stuff, especially if there's signs of something wrong within the first 3 days of their life. So the point is, I can use Andre's medical files for a lot of purposes, people. And not only can I use Andre's medical files for a lot of purposes, but there is no statute of limitation as to what happened to Andre when he was illegally apprehended from his home at age 28 months old. If Andre turns, once he gets to be 19 and he decides that he wants to sue the government for what they did to him, he can do that. So I just made it that much more easier for him. I don't think he will because he doesn't like to read and write, but that's okay because he's got me. Okay? So I needed basically on Andre's medical files so I could go back to the time when he was born through a C-section and compare those notes to Amari's notes. I can't really compare them to Shamay's notes because I don't have Sierra's. I don't know. I don't know what the dose. I'll never know what the dose. I will never know what the dosage of the fentanyl was that they gave Sierra before they gave her a C-section like I do with Shamay. I have Shamay's medical files so I can see how much they gave her of something like fentanyl before they gave her the C-section. And then they use that fentanyl as a means to come back to her, accuse her of doing drugs, do a series of tests on Amari to say that he had opiate in his urine, even though it was their opiate from their C-section. And then they proceeded to keep with the, he's, got to test his blood sugar count, got to do this and got to do that. But by the third day, just kick him out, say he was perfectly fine, and then proceed to ignore him as he's going to the clinic for follow-ups, right? Ignoring the fact that he was going cross-eyed, ignoring the fact that he wasn't he wasn't crawling, he wasn't sitting up, that he had floppy baby syndrome, to which doctors are trained to notice at very early stages. We just thought he was a late bloomer. Nobody knew, people, but the doctors knew. And they don't want me to have Sierra's medical records so I can compare the two records in terms of how C-sections are carried out in a documented sense. Okay? Now Andre, because his mom was on methadone for 6 months or whatever it was in the second and third trimester of her pregnancy, when he was born, he had issues with regulating his heat, his temperature, his body temperature. So they basically kept him for 2 weeks. That's what they said. But who knows? Who knows with these people? For all we know, they were monitoring us to see if we could even look after a baby, being that, right? So, right, Sierra was a recovered addict that got pregnant, and then she recovered because, she hunkered down and did the right thing and took methadone, went off the drugs, and for, 6 months took the methadone, and I don't know what happened in the last week, but I guess she ran off and rebelled, apparently did a little bit of cocaine, told the social worker about it. Next thing you know, they're rushing her off to the hospital to do an emergency C-section, even though I don't know if it was an emergency C-section, but it was definitely a C-section because, she admitted to doing whatever, right? And, it was a one-time thing in the last week or whatever it was of her pregnancy. She was coming due anyway, so they decided to do the C-section, get it over with, and social workers were around, right? So, and he has nasal issues and shit, right? So, but it was his temperature because of the methadone that took a while for it to learn to regulate his body. He couldn't regulate his body temperature. So he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So I'm going to get a lot of that information in here, but they're also going to take out a lot of the other information when it relates to the social workers and what they were talking about behind our backs. And then passing it between their files through that rumorville to spread the rumor, whatever rumor it is that they want to spread. Because not everybody that works in the system are ethical. Okay, let's face it, because they came back in and they illegally apprehended Andre at 28 months old after they illegally evicted my daughter, my vulnerable daughter, who has been doing really, really, really good. In the middle of winter, they threw her out, told her she couldn't come home, knowing that the handlers out there were going to inject her with drugs, and they had a lifelong and right up until her death, somebody to pimp and exploit and to take advantage of as they were milking the taxpayers to house Andre in foster care. As I went to court 22 times, people, in 15 months, fighting for my grandson to get him back home. As I had a lawyer tell me that if I didn't get up on it right away, I was going to lose him to foster care, to adoption, because that was the system. That's what it was about. That was the end goal. That's why they went after him, because he was cute, he had blonde curly hair, and he was 28 months old, and he was easy to adopt out. So, if I'm going to go to court 22 times, put up with all that nonsense, right, for my grandson, why would I turn my back on my daughters who birthed my grandchildren? I wouldn't. So, now, that's a lot of paperwork to go through with a magnifying glass and itchy eyes. So, before I put these into, what do you call those things? Binders and my plastics, I'm not going to do that. I don't think so. I think I'm going to approach it differently this time. I'm going to get myself one of those clips. Well, I'm going to clip him here. Okay, I got larger ones because this is thicker. So I'm going to clip him there. I'm not going to mix them up. I'm not going to move them around. And I should number them as I read them. Literally, I should number them as I read them. And make notes on what the page represents in terms of the number and what's being written on that page. And then insert my sticky tapes if I want to, if I haven't already typed it out on the computer. That's multitasking, okay? That's multitasking and trying to be proficient so that you don't waste time and you get to the crunch of the matter, okay? So I think that's what I'm going to do with that. But basically, I'm just curious to see, like, with the C-section, because, they put Amari at such a high number, but yet immediately started writing with, he's jittery, right? Right? And, they just geeked everybody up over it, and it was their means to do their urine test, to point their finger so they can import their fucking rumor and then spread it all across British Columbia, Canada, from clinic to clinic to clinic, from hospital to this to that to whatever, so that they can hide what they did to my grandson, people. 5 days. Shamay was in labor. They sent her home 2 days out of those 5 days. They were hoping she was going to take the morphine that they gave her, but she didn't. So they had to wait until they could do their, what do you call that? Their C-section, to import their fentanyl into her system so they can test the baby to find out that the fentanyl that they gave the mother was in the baby so they could accuse the mother. Right? And that's why it probably took 5 days to get to that point. Because they needed an escape route for what they were doing behind the scenes in terms of signing up my grandson to that research study that needed, you know, the cash cow to come in with the numbers. He was just a number to fill a slot so the money could be cashed infused into that research study. Okay? Where is all the material facts in that? I don't know. But I'll figure it out, people. I'll figure it out. One way or another, I'll figure it out. And being that my grandchildren were targeted, to which this judge, by the way, I'm supposed to get, I'm going to end it, okay? Which, by the way, I'm supposed to get the judgment tomorrow via email. So we'll see. We'll see if it comes in, and we'll see what he does. Just remember, he's a judge that has no power. He has no power to call an investigation into nothing. So if that's the case, then the man is pretty impotent, you know, with a limp dick, right? Okay? But yet he has the power, but he has the power to side with the government at the request of the government to throw it out. But he doesn't have the power to say, hold on, there's something fishy going on here. You know, it needs to be investigated. So he's not really working for the public because his only job is to dismiss it at the request of the government, because he told me that that was the reason that they called the MS team. Put on your headphones, look straight ahead, don't breathe, and accept what we tell you. Judgment. It's dismissed. Yeah, okay. You think so? Well, I don't think so, people. Okay? Right? Listen, when I file my appeal, which more than likely I will, and I'll walk you through it when I go through it, okay? The government's going to do the same damn thing. They're going to come in right behind me. I already been through it. With Andrew the Dragon and his 4 inches of paper, with my 3 pieces of paper. He turned it into a mini trial, had the judge chase the sheriff after me, and they threw it out, okay? Based on because Fraser Health Authority came in asking for that. Right? I'm coming in asking for something else. They come up behind you under some different form, asking to dismiss it, and that's an automatic given. It goes directly into that default. The judge doesn't even bat their eye, because that's the only reason that they're there for, is to dismiss it. And that's why these judges have no power. Right? They have no power. They think they have power. Yeah, power to destroy lives. Power to ignore criminal activity. Power to enable it to happen so that they can benefit when they're old and they need organs or whatever it is. Hip surgery. Right? Who fucking knows? Oh, sorry. Who boo-boo knows? Right? So anyway... And of course, I got to get to the emergency room here sometime soon, because there is no referrals coming in. I mean, that's plain to see, okay? 4 months later, I'm still waiting for a referral from a eye clinic that told me that they were going to give it to me, and then didn't fucking do it for me, and then said they did it, and nothing's still manifesting from it. Yeah, okay. Okay. So, I don't know what I'm going to find in here, but I'm sure half of it's missing. Okay? And just for the benefit of the doubt, I should write asking for these missing files, which will be denied, to which I'll have to take it to court. And I might be in front of this Judge Ross again. You never know. Yeah, I'm going to have to take it somewhere to start getting into the deeper files, with the ones that I can get, that is, right? You'll never get into Uncle John's, even though I gave them 20, 35 years more of fucking history, boo-boo history, right? Something that the Duncan clan have absolutely not one stitch of paper, because they weren't in his life. They were estranged. Something that the judge will ignore because the government's asking them to ignore it. Something that the judge will dismiss because the government is asking him to dismiss it, even though the evidence is right up in his face that I'm the one that had the enduring and power of attorney, 2 powers of attorney, and that Fraser Health Authority and CIBC Bank committed crimes, bank fraud, mail fraud, medical kidnapping, breach of trust, all kinds of crazy crap, right? Fraud. The judge is going to have no power to acknowledge, well, no, he may acknowledge it, but he'll ignore it and he'll just dismiss it because the government told him so.